Somewhere beyond the sunset, across the narrow sea, lay a land of green hills and flowered plains and great rushing rivers, where towers of dark stone rose amidst magnificent blue-gray mountains, and armored knights rode to battle beneath the banners of their lords. The Dothraki called that land Raish Andali, the land of the Andals. Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Read a Game of Thrones, where I'm your host, Riakeem, and I'm going to be reading off camera a Game of Thrones. Today we're going to be talking about the very first Daenerys viewpoint chapter, which is the third chapter of the book. So without further ado, let's get into it, and you can pretend that I have an intro theme song right here. Spoilers! As usual, there are massive spoilers in this video. If you have not read the books or seen the show past where this correlates, then stop watching now. Please go read the book and then come back and listen to my lovely voice. Alright, let's get down with the skinny of what this video is. This is a Let's Read. It is similar to a Let's Play, but I read the books off screen and do commentary and analysis on camera. This is the very first Daenerys chapter of George R.R. Martin's A Game of Thrones. You can look below in the description to find out more information about the book and my video series. This video will have a plot synopsis, some character overviews, some themes, topics, and symbols, very lightly in this episode, but they do exist in other episodes, and more. I will be switching it up from time to time, but I think for now I'm going to stick with the standard format. Alright, so if you're new here, I like to do my synopses with a who, what, when, where, and why, followed by a few of the major plot points of the chapter. So this is a Daenerys viewpoint chapter. What does that mean? That everything that we learn is through Daenerys's point of view. It is written in the third person, which I actually don't think I've said in this entire video series yet. Oh yeah, it is the third person, but it is through that character's viewpoint. Some other characters that are important in this chapter are Viserys, Daenerys' brother, and Magister Illyrio, their sort of foster father or caretaker, if you will, although Viserys is 21, so he doesn't really need a foster father. What we have, Daenerys is going to meet Khal Drogo. Actually, all the characters are going to meet Khal Drogo to present Daenerys, whom he is interested in wedding or marrying. When this is 13 years after the death of their father, and it occurs in the evening. Their father was the Mad King, who was killed 13 years ago in the rebellion of Robert Baratheon. They are in a place called Pentos. We're going to talk more about geography a little bit later in this video, but just know that they're in a place called Pentos, and then the chapter ends in Khal Drogo's manse. His mansion. Why? Viserys wants an army, and he feels that he is the heir to the throne that Robert Baratheon, the Starks, and the Lannisters have stolen from him, and he is interested in using Daenerys as a currency to wed to Khal Drogo so he can get Khal Drogo's army. Alright, so now that we've talked about the who, what, when, where, why, we're going to talk about some of the plot points. We have Daenerys and Viserys converse, and then Daenerys interacts with some slaves, and then Daenerys, Viserys, and Illyrio travel to Khal Drogo's manse. Daenerys sees all, and then Daenerys meets Khal Drogo. So what do we learn in this chapter? Before we talk about the characters, let's talk about what we learned. We learned in this chapter a little bit more about the Targaryens. We learned that they wed their siblings to each other to keep the blood pure. So in the traditional sense, Viserys, being the older brother of Daenerys, would marry Daenerys, so they would keep their blood pure and they would have incestuous children. Although that's not seen as something that is wrong in this world, or at least in the situations of the Targaryen. The golden blood of old Valyria, the blood of the dragon. Sounds powerful. From Dragonstone, House of the Dragon, that's where they were from, that's where their family sort of heritage comes from a place called Dragonstone. And it makes sense. We're getting a lot of stuff about dragons with the Targaryens. You know, their house symbol is a dragon. They're from a place called Dragonstone. They have dragon blood. You get the point. Ours is the house of the dragon, he would say. The fire is in our blood, and that ties us into heat. Now, I haven't really talked much about coldness and hotness a lot so far, but given that A Game of Thrones is a part of a series, A Song of Ice and Fire, you know that ice and fire are both going to be very meaningful. So the Targaryens represent a heat. They have sort of a heat resistance, or they embrace the heat more so than other houses. They are the enemies of the Lannisters and the Starks, and the Baratheons as well, one can assume. We see Viserys call the Lannisters and the Starks the usurpers' dogs. We learn more about geography. We know that where they are in Braavos, or in Pentos specifically, is a ways away from the north and the wall in King's Landing. So everything that we've read up until this point is way across the narrow sea. Now, we don't know how wide the sea or ocean is, but we know that it is in the west based on some of the descriptions in the story. Also, in the book, there is a map in the beginning pages. We know that there are free cities, but the free cities have slaves. We know that there's a place called Vice Dothraki, and sorry if I butcher some of that pronunciation, but I don't speak Dothraki, so excuse me if I make some mistakes. And we have the fabled lands beside the Jade Sea. We learn some other names of Westeros, or the North, as the map calls it. We learn that the Dothraki call it Raish Andali, the land of the Andals. Which is Westeros and the Sunset Kingdoms. And the sun sets in the west, so Westeros, Sunset Kingdoms, and you get the point. And Braavos, we learn more about Braavos. So what else do we learn? We learn a little bit more about religion. We see these characters called Red Priests, who light these things called night fires. It could just be nighttime and that they're lighting a fire, but they are closely associated with the third religion, the Lord of Light. So far we have seen the faceless gods. We have seen the seven, what were they? The seven gods, the seven... the faith of the seven, if you will. And now we have this new appearance of the Lord of Light with Red Priest. The Lord of Light would hold our city walls against 1,000,000 Dothraki, or so the Red Priests promise. We learn that a Khalasar is an army. We learn about the Narrow Sea, in that it separates Braavos and the Seven Kingdoms. And we get a little bit more mentionings of the doom of Valyria, but we still don't quite know what it is just yet. So next we're going to talk about some of the character overviews in this chapter. We have Daenerys, Viserys, Illyrio, and Khal Drogo. So Daenerys, our viewpoint character. We learn that her nickname is Dany. We learn that she has an appearance of violet eyes and molten silver hair. Now, if you've seen the show, they do a pretty good job, other than the age, because she is nowhere near Emilia Clarke's age, if you've seen the show. But yeah, violet eyes and molten silver hair. She's a 13-year-old, but she is very perceptive, as we've seen throughout her chapter. Given that she's a viewpoint character, she notices a lot of things that other characters, such as her brother, do not notice. So she's old enough to know that such gifts seldom come without their price, here in the free city of Pentos. Now, knowing that the free city of Pentos definitely have some slaves, this is in reference to Illyrio, and we don't really know his motives of why he is supporting them, but we will talk more about that when we get to the Illyrio chapter. We just know that Daenerys, or Dany, if you will, notices that he is doing it, but she just doesn't know his motives. Dany had not agents. She had no agents, I believe that's a typo. No way of knowing what anyone was doing or thinking across the narrow sea, but she mistrusted Illyrio's sweet words, as she mistrusted everything about Illyrio. So we know that, given that she is our viewpoint character, that Illyrio might be a character that cannot be trusted. She is the only woman at Khal Drogo's party at the end, or the reception or the feast at the manse, and that is something that she notices, again showing that she is a perceptive character. We learn a little bit more about her history, or a little bit more. We learn everything that we know up until this point about her history. We learn that she has never seen Westeros. She was born in Dragonstone after her after her mother and a few other people fled from King's Landing during Robert's Rebellion. And actually, I don't know if it's even called Robert's Rebellion yet, or if I just know that because I've already read the book and it's from the show. But yeah, she has never seen Westeros, but she was born in Dragonstone during a summer storm that destroyed the Targaryen fleet, thus the name Stormborn. Now, I actually don't know if her last name is Stormborn or if it is Daenerys Targaryen, but mostly you'll see her referred to as Daenerys Stormborn, and then 100 freaking other titles later on in the book series. And we know that her mother died in childbirth, which is interesting because one of my favorite things to discuss is the hero's journey, if you haven't discovered that by now. And they set Daenerys, or George R.R. Martin sets Daenerys up as a potential hero or heroine, if you're uncomfortable with that, but a hero. Heroes have mysterious parentage, and she has the heir, she is descendant from a famous bloodline, a magical bloodline associated with dragons. Heroes are often associated with dragons, whether or not they have to slay them or are, saved by them or part of them or what have you. And she has a mysterious parentage with her mother dying in childbirth. So that sort of sets her up. She also has moved a lot from Bravos to Mir to Tirosh, Crohar, Volantis, and Lys. Butchered those pronunciations, I know it. But as the years progress, they get less support. So they move. People like them, they know them. But then, the longer Robert sits on the Iron Throne, the more or the less people care about the Targaryens, the last dragons. So next we have the character of Viserys. This is Daenerys' brother, and I freaking hate Viserys. He is scum. So much scum that the people on the streets call him the Beggar King. He believes that because he is descendant of the throne, he has this magical right to be the king. And he wears that like a badge, and it is annoying. He is only 8 when they left King's Landing. His mother, who was pregnant with Daenerys at the time, to return to Dragonstone. So that makes him about 21 years or so now. His appearance: he has blonde hair and is paranoid. He appears to be freaking out all the time. He's always grabbing his sword and getting ready for something. He thinks he's being persecuted. He thinks there are these assassins out to get him, which there probably are, given his, he's the last in his blood. It makes sense that assassins are trying to kill him, but he's just so paranoid about it. A gaunt young man with nervous hands and a feverish look in his pale lilac eyes. I actually think lilac is a very pretty color. He is an obvious tool. I really hate Viserys. He is he often refers to his temper as waking the dragon. You will not fail me tonight. If you do, it will go hard for you. You don't want to wake the dragon, do you? Now, that is not as cool as, say, the Hulk saying, you wouldn't like me when I'm angry. Don't make me angry. It's more like someone who is so pompous that they have to say one of the lamest things to get people to take him seriously, and he just seems like a clown. Don't wake the dragon, I'm gonna get mad. And his character is just presented as being so dumb. He is a racist. He refers to the Dothraki as Dothraki screamers. He makes fun of their sexual practices, whether or not they are stereotypes or real. And he only wants Khal Drogo's for Khal Drogo's army. He only wants to use the Khal. So he clearly doesn't care about other people. He only cares about what he wants. He is naive, thinks things. Damn it. He thinks just that because he was heir to the throne that people want him to sit on it. And lastly, he clearly hates his sister. Dragons did not mate with the beasts of the field, and Targaryens did not mingle their blood with that of lesser men. But these are words that he says, but he wants to sort of sell his sister for an army to someone that does not have dragon's blood. So he clearly doesn't care about preserving that Targaryen blood, because given that that is his only sister, and knowing that Targaryens typically mate with their siblings, and that Khal Drogo does not have dragon's blood, he is not only tainting the dragon's blood, but he is choosing to give up the opportunity to keep his blood pure. So he hates his sister that much, if you think about it. And he even says to her, I am the last dragon. She's younger than he is, so they would be the last dragons. But no, he tells her, I am the last dragon. He does not care about Dany at all. And yeah, you can pretty much tell I don't like Viserys. With Khal Drogo's army, that is how we go home. And if you must wed him and bed him for that, you will. He smiled at her. I'd let his whole Khalasar, his whole army, fuck you if need be, sweet sister. All 40,000 men and their horses too, if that was what it took to get my army. So here we have an example of Viserys being a straight up tool. The next character we're going to talk about is Magister Illyrio, kind of another tool. Dany is surrounded by terrible people, or so we suspect. It is her viewpoint, right? So we could just be getting a bunch of things from her viewpoint that aren't necessarily correct. More so in the case of Magister Illyrio, Viserys is pretty much a tool. But his last name is Mopatis, or Mopatis, or however you want to say that. Illyrio Mopatis. We do not know his motives. We just know that he took these two Targaryens in. He could genuinely care about them because they are the last of such a powerful blood type. And he knows that if they survive that, you know, he could probably rise in power. Though he is already a pretty fantastically rich character. But we just don't know why. And Dany even says, why does he give us so much? She asks, what does he want from us? So he's filthy rich, very wealthy. He's a dealer in spices, gemstones, dragon bone, and other less savory things. So we know that dragons existed and that their bones are still around and that people trade them and get rich off them. Which is kind of interesting to think that Daenerys and Viserys are the last quote-unquote dragons, and he sells dragon bones. So that's an interesting comparison to note. And like, he also deals in less savory things, so he's probably a drug dealer or some shit. He will sell his friends cheerfully for the right price. So that is just a scummy thing to say about anybody. They sell their friends. No one sells their friends if they're truly your friends or if they're a good person. He has an appearance that mimics what it is like to be wealthy in such a time period. He is fat. That means that he probably has a lot of money. He can just eat whatever he wants. He can do whatever he pleases with his money. So usually in sort of this time period, you see people who are fatter typically are wealthy. The poor people don't really get fat because they don't have enough money to eat as much and get fat. Unlike today, where you can get fat by eating a popsicle. He's adorned with gemstones and loose garments. It took 2 strong men to get Magister Illyrio back on his feet. So he has a definite William Taft situation going on. He has a forked yellow beard that shone like gold. So even like natural parts of his body are like representative of how wealthy this man is. Also, he stinks and is nasty. This is something that particularly comes from Dany's viewpoint, but Dany could smell the stench of Illyrio's pallid flesh through his heavy perfumes. Ew, gross. He touches Dany. Did I spell touches right? Shit. Touches. I don't know if that's it looks weird to me. He touches Dany on the shoulder with a moist hand. Like, who has a moist hand, son? I'd be like, get up off me, son. Don't touch me with your nasty ass wet hand. He may be metaphorically foul. So he is described as being stinky and nasty, and that could also be a metaphor to symbolize the idea that he is untrustworthy. He is literally and physically he is literally and metaphorically untrustworthy and scummy. Alright, so finally we have Khal Drogo as a character. He only appears right at the end of the chapter, but he's talked about throughout the whole chapter. Yeah, so Khal is a Dothraki. is a Dothraki title, and Khal is a Dothraki title. I cannot write tonight. It was a late night, everybody. Of which he is a Khal. He is a Khal, and he is Dothraki. I don't know why I wrote that so redundantly. But yeah, the Dothraki. We learn a little bit more about the Dothraki through talking about Khal Drogo. They typically have copper skin and dark almond eyes. They are described as being horse lords. Some of them, not all of them are horse lords, but some of them are horse lords. And they are described as having red-brown skin, drooping mustachios bound in metal rings. That's the horse lord characters. Black hair oiled and braided and hung with bells. The savages have queer taste. Boys, horses, sheep. That's something that Viserys says. He has a lot of wealth, appearance, and talk. So, a lot of what we see about him are through appearance and talk. So a lot of his wealth is exaggerated through, appearance and talk. Now, the key thing to note is that though Khal Drogo is wealthy, it's a different kind of wealth as opposed to what Magister Illyrio has. His wealth seems to be a little bit more meaningful, but we'll talk more about that in the chapters to come. Khal Drogo has 1,000 horses. Tonight he looks for a different sort of mount. Did I mention that Viserys was a tool? Drogo is so rich that even his slaves wear golden collars. Is sort of bathroom chatter. Dany notices that they don't really have golden collars when she arrives at the party that evening, or the feast. I keep saying party, but it's a feast. He has the Khalasar with 100,000 men. So his wealth sort of has some earnedness behind it, if you will. Unlike Magister Illyrio, we don't really know much about his wealth. We can see that Khal Drogo is a powerful individual who seems to have earned everything that he has. He is a brave warrior. When we talk about his braid, it's never been cut off. He has all these horses. He has people that are willing to die for him. We see with the 3 blood riders that ride or die. Ain't nobody messing with his click, click, click. He has been called a demon archer. Is he so good that it must be ungodly? So he's a really good archer. He's handsome, he's fearless, he has that long braid that we talked about. He has a palace in Viserys. So it seems like there's a lot more earnestness behind what he has as opposed to Magister Illyrio. He is a head taller than the tallest man in the room, so he's very big. And knowing that Dany's only 13, she's probably really tiny. Although girls do get taller than boys at that age, he is still probably, because he's described as being not quite 30, no more than 30 years of age. But, he is this tall thing and she is this little thing. And they're going to marry her to him. He was called Aegon the Dragon Lord. Come again, and you will be his queen. That's what Viserys says to Daenerys. So I just want to go through some of the other characters as quickly as possible, because I know the videos are already getting kind of long, but we learn that Robert has a nickname, the Usurper. He has a brother. We know that some other houses in Westeros, or wherever they are, they may not be in Westeros, the Tyrells, the Redwynes, the Darys, and the Greyjoys, they all are against Robert, and Viserys thinks that they would stand with him if he were to have a rebellion. We have Rhaegar, who is the older brother of Viserys and Daenerys. He died for the woman he loved. We get more the further we read. And Princess Elia of Dorne was carrying his child and they were murdered. We have the Kingslayer, the Golden Sword, who is a Lannister, but we don't know whom that is. We are exposed to Sir Willem Darry and 4 loyal men who took them being Viserys and Daenerys, to the Braavosian Sea, or the Braavosian coast rather, in a night rescue. So he was very responsible to rescuing them, and Daenerys remembers him as a great bear of a man, half blind, roaring and bellowing orders from his sickbed. On page 31, but kind to Dany he was, little princess and my lady he would call her. So she has fond memories of Sir Willem Darry. So, and that's also a memory that she has of knights, which is important when we meet another character later on. We know that there are slaves. There was no slavery in the free city of Pentos. Nonetheless, there were slaves. We get mention of Aegon the Conqueror, who is an ancient Targaryen, who is a ascendant, not ascendant. He is a Targaryen ancestor. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. We learned that there are men or women called the Unsullied, but we don't know much more about them. We know there's another Khal at the party called Moro, who has a son, Rogoro. He's probably a Khal of another land, probably has as much riches as Khal Drogo, maybe not, maybe more. We learned that there is a green bearded brother to the Archon of Tyrosh, and through that we learned that there is something called an Archon of Tyrosh. Don't know quite what that is as it is presented in the chapters, but we will probably learn more as we read. Now we get to Sir Jorah Mormont. Remember when I was talking about knights earlier? He is wanted by the king, so he is in Bravos. Now we know what happens when oaths are broken in this world. Don't fucking do it. Don't break oaths. They will kill you. They will cut your head off with the sword ice. But Sir Jorah Mormont has found a way to get away and is in Pentos now at Khal Drogo's feast. Oh yeah, knowing that Daenerys has such a disposition towards knights, thinking about Sir Willem, she is already fascinated with Sir Jorah Mormont. Alright, so briefly, we're going to talk about themes, topics, and symbols. Again, we have swords. We have the golden sword of the Kingslayer, and then we have Viserys always touching his sword as sort of like a safety net when he's cowarding. If you go back and read through the chapter, just count how many times he puts his hand on the hilt of his sword and is ready to get beat up, probably, because Daenerys says that he has never really used the sword, so what is he even really doing with it? And then we get some imagery of fire. The water was scalding hot, but Daenerys did not flinch or cry out. She liked the heat. It made her feel clean. Besides, her brother had often told her that it was never too hot for a Targaryen. So we get a little bit more of that Targaryen associated with hot things and fire and dragons. And then we have Red Priests, the Red Priests and their night fires. So curious to learn more about Red Priests as the story unfolds. So thank you for making it this far in the video. If you're still here, please like, comment, and subscribe. Eventually I'm going to start doing the questions of the day. There's me holding the book. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. And check out my Goodreads account. As I said in the last video, I'm bringing you daily videos of Game of Thrones, Let's Reads, and this weekend I'm going to update all of my social media and get it ready for you guys. Please enjoy. Thanks for watching if you're still here again, and I gotta get a theme song on this. Have a good night, everybody.